This is augforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention 3 things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV, NFC terminals for counter sale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all of their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is 24/7 Digitize. 24/7 Digitize is an Acumatica bookkeeping service provider that helps derive the best value from your Acumatica investment by maintaining your books utilizing Acumatica's best practices and guidelines. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Wednesday, December 21st, 2022, and this is episode number 105. Jeremy and Shawn Burt, VelocIT Acquisition by Paya, and Standing Up an Exceptional Team. Hey guys, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy almost New Year, Merry almost Christmas. You squeezed it in right before the holidays. Good job. That's dedication.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's funny because I was teasing Shawn about having his camera off, and he's like, I'm surrounded by Christmas shopping boxes and all this other stuff, so my camera's staying off.
Typical IT guy, right? Yeah, we don't like the cameras on.
My office, looks like yours is, used to be my garage, and we remodeled it into my office when we moved home from, previous business exploits, and unfortunately that means that it's also my wife's storage room when I'm not looking.
I hear you. Well, hey, first off, I like putting people's names in front of the episode title. I got Jeremy and Shawn Burt. Just want to clarify, you two are related. Is that correct?
That is correct. Shawn is the older, wiser one, and I'm the kind of sales and marketing kind of mindset. I'm the person selling the idea. So that's how we fit together. And I always like to say the younger, much better looking one, but you know what? That doesn't really age well now. It's I think it's starting to go back the other way.
Well, it's easy to claim when you're the only one with a camera on, right?
He dresses nicer than I do.
Well, maybe we could start off by, I know this is, we're talking before we hit record. This is a bit of old news, but it's still something we wanted to make sure we talked about. We talked about the acquisition, and then we could go from there. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Absolutely. So we in January of this year we had an official announcement that we were acquired by Paya, and really it was the nuts and bolts of it were really around their emphasis and desire to really kind of pick up a best in class offering in Acumatica and pull that outside development work in house. I think that the initial move to market for them was to have a vendor build a plugin. As folks, Paya's history is Sage Payment Solutions. The lineage has always been ERP. That development really happened inside of the software groups when Sage Payment Solutions and Sage Software were one family. And the strengths that Paya had were around the operations, and the Sage Payment Solutions that was left behind, carved out by Paya, was the acquiring and the support of the merchant accounts and all that operational sales function. And I think that there was a little bit left behind when that separation was made, and they were able to do quite a lot without a ton of product development in-house initially. And it's been basically a focus of our Chief Strategy Officer, Ben Weiner, over the last couple of years to really get his arms around product and be able to push out best in class. And this was an immediate fit to solve one of the problems. And there's, or I guess really opportunities to be better. And so the acquisition has been a whirlwind. I mean, obviously we're talking about it here. It is 11 months later. So we've been very busy.
Yeah, some of these details you might not be able to discuss, but you mentioned Sage Payment Solutions. How much are you able to talk about the details there? Like, I didn't remember that Paya was a separate company, but kind of white labeled as Sage Payment Solutions. To me, it's important to understand because, Sage is a pretty big ERP player, and, they go through a vetting process for a payment provider. Are you able to tell us more about what that was?
I think the history out there has been pretty public. And so my background is I worked there at Sage Payment Solutions in 2012. Prior to that, I actually was in public power. And I think more interestingly is Shawn's background in software when we get there. But the Sage payment, kind of a Cliff Notes version, is when Sage decided to integrate payments in their software, and this is kind of secondhand, loosely putting together the story. I'm not a spokesperson for the history of Sage Payment Solutions, but as I understood it, they had taken, I think it was 5 or 6 regional players back in 2005 or 6 and put them together. They had made acquisitions in different regions. Some folks had sales teams, some folks had, with industry knowledge of payments, and, maybe there was a gateway or some particular tech involved. Some of them, I think Vital and Net1, I think are 2 of the components. I don't know all of the history and lingo, but they put together this team essentially and labeled it Sage Payment Solutions. And so that was the payments arm, was all this talent from all these different factions. And that came together to make Sage Payment Solutions as everybody knew it. And then the integration started rolling out in sometime in 2006, 2007. And I remember some of the sales folks that I knew back when that were on the front end, their biggest challenge was when they would go to the resellers and the software folks, they would say, "Hey, we've got this integration for Sage 100." And everybody's like, "I've never heard of you." No, you don't. And so they had a whole different set of problems to demonstrate what Sage was releasing from a sales and marketing strategy. And then, they kind of hit their heyday in probably 2009, 10, 11, in that area. I do know when I came in 2012, we had regional sales directors that had teams of 10 or 20 people that were selling, and you had a faction of them that were selling on Main Street, this regular merchant services terminals. And then you had some leaders in the sales group that were selling in that vertically integrated ERP market. And so these pods were all managed by a regional sales director. So there was a lot of reach. And then it went through a transitional period where Sage decided to restructure that group for whatever, however corporations and whys, I don't know. And there was disruption to those relationship channels, and they had let some sales folks go. And about that time, I had kind of come and gone from realizing I wasn't going to be part of that software piece of it, which was my goal. So in 2013, I actually went out and started my own independent sales organization, as they call it, an ISO. And I partnered up. I had an agreement with Sage SPS, Sage Payment Solutions, and I had an agreement with First Data and some other folks in out there. It was multiple. I kind of fancied the company as like your independent sales insurance agent, where bring us your solutions and we'll figure out which channel works best for you. Here's my integrated channel with Paya. And I didn't have a lot of reach in the channel or exposure at that time. And so that's sort of the history of, Sage Payment Solutions. Then decided, I'm getting a little focused on the question again. Sage Payment Solutions did carve out payments. Sage carved out the payments group, and that was acquired by Paya, which GTCR was the holding company, and they branded it as Paya, right? So that's sort of how this Paya company came about. So the lineage obviously is deeply rooted in ERP. There's been some transitional periods and some transitional periods of management that has been more focused in or less focused on the core business. I think people would appreciate that anytime a company goes through a leadership transition and they're saying our core business is ERP, to grow, we have to go do this. And so I think depending on if you're a reseller or if you're a former employee or what your position, what your take is on this, there were times where we were probably not as focused on the core products as we should have been. And right now what's happening is ERP and the core products is now it's our crown jewel. It's where a big core of our business is. Over the last couple of years, though, they have brought in First Billing, which First Billing is a government billing group and platform. They're doing a great job and expanding. They're one of our pillars. We have a giving stewardship pillar, and we obviously have our ACH pillar, which is the ACH business is owning our own ACH platform is not only a big strength and advantage, but a lot of our competitors leverage it as well. Up and down these verticals. So that all is sort of the business today. Our focus, obviously, is the B2B business, and the B2B business is all wrapped up in that is the ERP verticals. It's our lineage. It's all these relationships with Sage. It's the relationships with Acumatica and all the resellers that sort of intertwine across all of those product lines. I think you will see, executing on us, adding other logos in that particular, in this vertical. I'm not privy to all of those inner workings and what's happening there. And, not here to make an announcement on where and what we're doing and where we're going. But that is an expectation is that we need to cover more cloud-based products. And I think that goes without saying. Anybody's got to, grow their footprint. But, I think the big message today for us is, and one of the reasons why when you and I started talking early on, I knew that it wasn't going to be an immediate, hey, Paya's here to really, dominate the Acumatica channel. We felt like with our integrations and our team skill sets that would be hopefully what folks would be saying about us in the payments space in short order. But we spent this last year not only integrating VelocIT, but really completely re-envisioning and rebuilding the partner channel, how we serve it. And you can't lead with the sales message. It took us a year of bringing in experts. I think at one meeting, Shawn, you were remote at that, but I think at one meeting we went around the table and added up that we had like 250 years of ERP experience around our table. We brought in Rebecca Mergner, manages all of our product across multiple different, Sage 100, 300, 500, X3, Acumatica, and we have subject matter experts on all these product lines now. And we have consultants in these product lines that have been doing this for years. Rebecca's got 30 years of Sage 100 alone, and also has probably 5 years now of Acumatica experience. We brought in a consultant for Acumatica who's been doing implementations for, how long's Nick been at it, Shawn? Like 7 years, maybe?
Well, I know it's been long enough that Nick was at the very first hackathon and the very first summit for Acumatica. Like when it was like 12 guys in a back room, Nick was one of them.
So it's been a long time, and I think I actually I mentioned that, and he's like, no, because I saw that and I remember it, because I was shortly after that. But anyway, I digress on that. I don't want to put it. I know that we had that conversation, but so what this is essentially, when we do come to market at this point, it's not a product somebody else built, right, and tells us is good. We have products that not only do we build them, but they're coming from ideas from the channel, right? Our customers are coming back and saying, I need Acumatica to do this to achieve my commerce goals. We had a problem with this other person couldn't do that, right? And I mean, I'm the first to admit that, there's nobody out there that can be everything to everybody. Some folks are stronger in some areas. I think we have North America very well covered and tight with all of our processes and all of the things that we can do. There's some folks that are going to be better overseas from an acquiring standpoint. Although our technical, ability in our tech stack is sort of universal in Acumatica. Your only limitation is your gateway and your acquiring capabilities in that particular country. But so as we moved through this year and got this team stood up.
Can I ask you real quick on the team? So you mentioned like Nick and some others. How important is it to you to have Acumatica specific knowledge? Because you think of payments, it's like, well, I need to understand how the payment process works, and then the ERP plugin is just this kind of, I don't know, icing on the cake, if that. It's just a little piece at the end. You seem to be talking about a real focus on Acumatica. Why is that? What's the importance of knowing Acumatica when really all you're doing is payments?
Well, Shawn can probably speak for a long time on this because he lives it day in and day out. And I'm just going to tee it up like this, and I'm going to let Shawn kind of dive into that question. I think that nobody in the channel is, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, right? Because we don't want to be judged on our worst day. But our mantra in this has been, let's keep the ERP people in the ERP, right? We understand they want to do, and we keep the customers in a great experience. And in between, our job is to not say, it's not us, prove it. Our job is to give the best and quickest possible information to our reseller and our customer to keep them functional and moving forward. Without doing hundreds and hundreds of customizations over the years that Shawn and Nick have been involved in implementations, you just don't know how expansive the product is. But Shawn, obviously you probably have, an opinion about why it's so important to know Acumatica. I just know that I can't go out there and sell it and stand behind it if I don't have these experts that are saying, here's what we need to accomplish, right? And so a lot of it comes down to pre-sales and us meeting with the customer and setting expectations that we know we can achieve. But Shawn, you probably have a little bit of insight on that as well, just from how you've been.
My point of view has always been that, and this is not just Acumatica, it's any industry that I've been in, is that my job is to understand how you do your job and how better to improve that workflow, how better to make your life easier. If all I've done is change the name on the button that you're pushing because you're now running the Paya button instead of running the, off.net button, I've not accomplished anything. I've not made your life any better. Maybe I've saved you a little bit of money, maybe I haven't, but the workflows need to be tailored to what you do in your day-to-day life. And so we feel like it's really important that we understand how the Acumatica users use Acumatica to know how the payments fit into it. If you're, I think a really good example of this, and this is something actually Acumatica has learned and made improvements on in 20R1, if you did a payment inside of a sales order, it never hit the GL until you actually created the invoice. That caused all kinds of problems for the finance people because they were carrying these balances in their checking accounts with no way to reconcile it until the thing was actually, shipped off and processed. If they ran a pre-auth, it didn't matter, but if they actually were running a true captured sale and prepaying that sales order, it didn't post right. And, one of the things we did in our early versions was put in controls for that to make sure things did post ahead of time so that they could get them. Another one early on was unlinked returns or unlinked refunds. If you have the ability, you need to refund money to your customer, but you don't have a specific invoice or a specific thing to reference to do the refund on, there was no way to do a refund. You had to do it, linked to some other transaction, which meant that we had no good way to process, especially in a card present scenario, that transaction back. Again, Acumatica is caught up, and we work really closely with them. We really feel like the stuff that we're bringing out isn't necessarily a competitive advantage for us. It's what the product needs. And then we work with Acumatica to get that product offering added into the core function. And so it's all about, understanding that flow and where things sit, what they can do them with. We offer payments inside of quotes now. So if you send out a quote to your customer and you want to be able to have them say, hey, prepay that quote, and we'll then go ahead and convert it into a sales order and work the flow of, your order. We allow that now. Acumatica doesn't actually. We've got some flows to make that process work. I suspect, though, that a lot of the stuff that we build in, Acumatica eventually brings into the core. I think probably you'll start seeing stuff like that being added in as well. And so, again, my personal opinion has always been that it's not about the developer's idea. It's about the end user's need. And then we just do our best to match that up. And so if we don't understand how the salesperson is doing that data entry and why they're doing that data entry, there's no way for us to actually build a customization that's going to work for them. We can build stuff and we can make it work, but it's probably not useful.
So it sounds to me like you're not just sitting in your payments bubble or in your payments ivory tower. You've got your payments hat on, but you're kind of walking around the Acumatica world, and you really want to understand that language and be in that world, not just be in the payments world and kind of have a handshake over to the Acumatica world. And, based on feedback I've heard, especially, back to the VelocIT days, you guys were very good at that. You had a very good reputation of knowing Acumatica. And, even you mentioned earlier about if there's a conflict between customizations, might not even have been your customization, but you get in there and you do what it takes, even if it's not necessarily your issue. And you try your best not to just have a finger pointing exercise. To me, that all comes down to really leaning into the product and knowing Acumatica well, and not just knowing payments well, and kind of staying, within that realm.
We're very much willing to stand up a dev instance, with a snapshot of your data and all your customizations and debug it holistically so we can see, is it our code failing or is it somebody else's code failing? Or is it a combination of the two? And, is it something, in some cases, we've ran into situations where there was technically a bug in somebody else's code, but it was easier for us to modify our code to go ahead and just deal with their bug and fix the solution that way.
Wow.
We were actually able to, compensate, if you will, for that problem. And, in some cases, it's as simple as just changing, a field name on on a form, right? You get those errors when you try to publish where, two different developers are using the same control name on a screen. In our case, we can go in and, again, tweak it sometimes just on the customer system themselves and hit publish again, and then it's taken care of. In some cases, it's, actual business logic that you're modifying. But we've got, skilled enough developers and skilled enough QA/debugging people that we can go in and we can still look at other people's code even though we don't have their source, and see what the flow is and understand where the breakage is happening. And so then we can get with those other vendors and, try to work out as a group what the best solution is. And it's much easier when you come at it from that tact than, and like, if I go to vendor A and say, hey, you know what, I found a problem with a shared customer. Here's what it looks like to me. Can you help me? They're much more willing to work with you than if you go back to the consultant and say, hey, the software you bought from this joker isn't any good. And so it's much easier to play with other developers when you come at it from that, joint benefit.
Yeah, you sound, Shawn, to me more like an Acumatica developer who also does payments rather than a payments developer who also does Acumatica.
Yeah. Yep.
Am I on the right track there?
Yep. I've done customizations across pretty much every single module that Acumatica has, and I really like, as Jeremy said, I can praise Acumatica all day long. I've enjoyed working with it enough to where at one point we were looking at, before the acquisition, building a new system to help manage our business, and we were looking at actually taking Acumatica framework and building our own thing from the ground up, but still leveraging that functionality.
Oh, wow.
Because it was just, it's just that good. And it's that much easier for us to, if you will, drink your own Kool-Aid if you can leverage the stuff you're really good at anyhow. And so that's been our take on it.
You've mentioned other customizations. So like, are you going even outside the payments realm? Like is your dev team totally separate at Paya where you'll do any type of Acumatica customization? I mean, where do you draw the line, I guess?
It's all about what the partner needs and what the customer needs. We quite often, we tend to stick into the payment space for our team. But if the right opportunity comes up, again, we've got the skill set across the entire ecosystem. We've helped companies in the past do stuff in, a field service and, in the CRM opportunity space. We actually have a roadmap item right now to add payments to CRM opportunities, or quotes. So if you are initiating a quote from within the CRM module and you want to have that be prepaid before you roll it into the rest of distribution, we'll be able to handle that at some point. And so we do tend to, lean towards the payment space, obviously, but because we've got the background and to be honest with you, it's still kind of hard to find really good Acumatica resources out there. We just like to let our partners, have access to the resources as part of the benefit of working with us.
What's interesting too about that is Shawn, I haven't seen this as much in the Sage space, but in Acumatica, we've come across a handful of now that are self-implemented. They have their own consultant and they're a direct Acumatica customer. And so those folks have leaned on, Shawn especially, and now the Paya team. And usually they're large customers, but they will now, I've always said development's like a drug. So when people find out about Shawn, essentially you have folks like Rebecca who want to manage and not allow access so much because we can get derailed. But Shawn's been more than willing in a lot of cases, like you heard. Sometimes we'll make a tweak on our stuff just to keep people functional and then come back with a holistic approach of what needs to be updated. So our interruptions are typically, if there is any, are minimized. We have, a lot of times when we have a problem, we're coming at it with multiple solutions. And it's funny is we were at ITA recently, and some folks, Acumatica was part of the discussion. Things that are happening at Sage and Intact were part of the discussion. All the different, as you know, in the channel, all the different excitement. And when folks were talking Acumatica, we have some partners that are like, I hate to tell you, but you want these guys, but yet don't hog them. Some of the smaller partners are telling some of the bigger partners, like, that's where, there's been a lot of change in the channel. And I'm not going to throw names out, and, we're not here to talk about other people, but some of those changes have been good for us. And some of those changes are right now challenging and hard for other partners to deal with, because they've went all in with a particular player in the channel. And now they're having, I think for us, it's nice to know that we're starting, Paya had some challenges, over the years themselves. And now we're seeing that we're on this different trajectory now where some other folks are struggling, which bodes well for us. Right. But again, that underlying point of why is that? Well, when you love the product and you got great teams and they all work well together and they're all known, eventually everything it's just sort of an incestual business and industry, that they find out where all the talent is and where the product is servicing their customers better. And that just takes time. And we're starting to see that happen now, where Paya is now, a year ago, we were sort of, struggling prior to VelocIT with this particular product. And now all of a sudden we're on this other whole thing, this other new momentum that around not only in our Acumatica practice, but we're seeing uplift and changes because of our holistic approach to product development and putting the people that know the product back inside of these teams. That's really benefiting us, right? And we stood it up in the right way. But I do want to point out something about the Shawn thing that'll interest you is he comes from accounting.
Wait, before you go there, I want to ask you more on the standing up an exceptional team. Maybe talk me through some points from this past year of how you approached that. Was it really one key thing is I'm curious about is the Acumatica part of it. How much was that a factor in standing up a team, and how did you go about building out your exceptional team?
Well, this is going to be a Shawn question, because my job when I came in was integrating VelocIT as a whole. And part of that was turning over a lot of the initial product and team formation to Rebecca and Shawn. And, Shawn really leading the development, Rebecca leading the process. And so, Shawn, you could probably talk about this last year. I mean, obviously we had demands. We knew that we were inheriting a product that was built by another channel developer. And we had to take the Acumatica product and, the VelocIT Acumatica product and rebrand and shove everything together as Paya. And from there, we knew that we needed to make sure that Shawn had a second set of eyes. I will tell you this, that was helping us on the go forward, bringing in, doing demos and solutioning and helping us with running the product and QAing it. So that's really where Nick Hoyer came in and hit the ground running. And he constantly is challenging. Well, Shawn will produce and say, hey, QA it, and Nick will beat on it from and as you know, it goes without saying, Acumatica and what a payment is so ambiguous compared to the older rigid systems, that there's so many ways that we will test it how our customers today that we know use it. Nick will test it and go in every particular way that he can and challenge it and break it. So he's constantly hardening the code. And that was sort of step one, was having that resource for Shawn. And then a lot of the rest of it was Shawn's vision based on requests and goals that we had for the channel. So Shawn, you could probably talk a little bit more about, how your team is built out and what you've done this year.
Yeah, we took a little bit of different tact on the Acumatica side than we have historically. Part of that's been driven by Acumatica themselves. So the certification process has changed substantially with Acumatica, and part of that change has been the requirement of automation testing. And so that Acumatica themselves can run tests against your software as they do new releases to give you a heads up if there's going to be something wrong. And so, like one of our—
You're talking about the ISV certification process, right?
Yeah, the Acumatica refers to the new feature is the test SDK. And so, as you build a product within Acumatica that you're expecting to be out in general release, so you don't necessarily do this for every single customization, but stuff that's going to be on multiple instances across multiple partners and whatnot, you'll get it certified. And that part of that certification process will be this test SDK. So we have a dedicated developer that is writing all of our test scripts and making it to where if we have a customer that comes in, and whether they find a bug or they find a new feature they want or whatever it happens to be, but we've done new development work because of a customer input. When Nick's doing QA, he can hyper-focus on that new feature, on that new change and how it interacts with everything, and not have to worry about like full regression testing of the entire, product line, because that's all handled with the test automation. And so that's really made us a lot more, I think, be able to put out a lot, what's the word I'm looking for here? Gives a lot more stable products quicker, because we're not, missing some nook and cranny that only one person uses, because the test automation is catching all that.
Agile.
Since you brought that up, oh, sorry.
No, I was saying Agile comes to mind. I mean, our testing, everybody talks about Agile, but I mean, it's made your testing and your processes a little more Agile, that you can rapidly deploy and rapidly R&D with those processes in place.
And it also facilitates us. We strive really hard to have same day, solves on problems. If somebody identifies an issue, we strive really hard to try to get resolution, if at all possible, same day for a customer issue if something pops up. Whether that is we get them a workaround on how to process something a different way, or whether we come out with a whole nother publication for them to publish with their consultants that night. These new testing methodologies have made that a lot more feasible, because we don't have to worry about whether or not, did we inadvertently break something, because the test automation will catch that on the fly. And so
I'm curious, based on your experience with that, I don't know how difficult it is to write these, actually code these testing scenarios, but have you seen anyone, or do you feel like it's quite at the point where it's ready for customers to use for their upgrades? Upgrades are always a pain for people, right? And if you wrote your own testing for your own business and what kind of things you'd want to test in an upgrade, do you feel like it's even worth the effort at this point, given what you know about what it takes to code a testing,
I think,
what you call it, test process?
Yeah, that one's a hard one, partly because the requirements of the test SDK stuff, you're literally writing another customization that is doing stuff with Acumatica, to automate the screen entries and stuff. The technology is based on an older technology called Selenium, which allows you to basically automate any website. What Acumatica has done a little bit differently is that they've wrapped their classes in a way that allows you to essentially code, open the login form, enter in the username, enter in the password, click the login button. It makes it a lot easier to script it. There was actually a hackathon project, I think it was last year, that they did at Summit, where they had come up with a way to almost let you record you going through and doing the steps inside the UI, and it would convert it into code for you. If that ever really got fleshed out, that would be really cool for upgrade processes, because you could go through one time with your testing and then essentially record it and then every time you attempted it again, you could replay the process and say, yep, it worked this time, or no, it didn't. But yeah, I would, like right now, I don't think so, but it's getting there. It's getting there. I think you could use it, but right now the process is such that it's so much coding that I think it would take you longer to code it than it would be to just do it a couple times by hand. Depending on
that was kind of my hunch. I was curious your take on that. Yeah, that makes sense for a one-off, as infrequently as you do upgrades. Yeah.
Now a lot of that code, interestingly enough, is recyclable, to where if you're not dealing with super specialized stuff, testing data entry in a sales order or the shipping process or whatever, you could probably write that once and use it across multiple versions of Acumatica for going through different upgrades. So it might be worthwhile for a base testing script for a consultant to use within their practice, and saying, hey, we know going from this version of Acumatica to this version of Acumatica that we have, these specific issues we need to test for. And they could theoretically write a script and be able to do tests on people's data, in a sandbox and know whether or not it worked. But, company-specific ones, where you've got, whether it's a crazy number of customizations or whatever, it would take quite a bit to get it coded out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I know we have currently, 4 versions. Actually, we're starting on the 5th, so we've got 21R1 through 23R1 that we've got built out for our product line right now. And for the most part, there's always little things, right? We realized we spelt this field wrong, and they change a field name, or they do little changes here and there to UI. But for the most part, like, we've been able to use almost the same automation script across all 5 of those versions. Little spelling changes here and there, and then Acumatica will, in their test SDK, actually give you, for every single release, an updated, what they call wrapper for the SDK. And typically you just recompile your code. You don't actually have to rebuild anything, rewrite anything, unless there was some major change. But, there's always that upkeep between versions you've got to deal with.
And Jeremy, you were going to head something with Shawn being an accountant direction before I diverted us. I'll let you get back to that. Sorry.
I think it fits in well here, because when we started down the path of playing with Acumatica, Shawn's, I think the strength that he brings foundationally and selfishly for sales, right, and pre-sales engineering, which is a big strength of where Paya's moved to, is the sales engineering process that we do. Something that we were able to add in with VelocIT's, background, is that he's been in so many different businesses and touched so many different software over the years. His background's, I've seen some of the other podcasts, and I think it's kind of what made me bring it up is that the background is fascinating. He comes from a VB6, background in banking and the software he's written, and that translated into us doing some stuff in 500, which we lacked a little bit of the business logic in 500, and with the architect that we had at the time that was helping us. But, he taught himself some Providex along the way to deal with 100. And, so there's an interesting background there. So I would say, Shawn, I think it's probably worth bringing up sort of how we landed into Acumatica and why you think it is a great product. Probably comes from your background. So where did you start developing is probably the more appropriate question.
Well, in all seriousness, I've been developing since elementary school. But my main professional career started in banking. I was hired to work for a bank in '97. My first task from our CFO was, hey, the Fed Reserve is starting this thing called Check 21, and they want us to be a beta bank. What do you think we can do with that? And we went out to see if there's anybody in the industry that could help us, and it was so new that we couldn't find any help. So literally, in February, I started writing the interface for Check 21, working with the 12th District in Seattle, and we were distributing image statements by May. And that began my really, my big career into, banking and accounting, dealing with reconciling all these images coming in back to the actual banking information, and then moved into business intelligence and working with the CFO specifically to work on balancing and automations and whatnot to pull that report data out of the mainframe and make sure everything reconciled back every single day. When I started doing some of that work, interestingly enough, they had a paper form that they used to do the reconciliation, and it was so intensive, they only did it once a quarter, and they just hoped to God it was in balance. And if it wasn't, then they'd go back to the previous month end and see if it balanced there. And it was always just kind of this cut in half until they found, okay, here's the day that was bad. And we got to the point where it took a day and a half for them to go through the reconciliation process. We got it down to 5 minutes, and we would just load the reports out, and they would run it every single day. If there was something wrong, they'd figure it out and take care of it, and then it no longer became a problem. But it was always such an ordeal at the end of the quarter to go through that process. And that's kind of where I learned as a developer to come in and understand what I'm trying to help with. It's not just like, hey, I got this problem, can you solve it? It's more like you need to understand the flow and why the people are doing their job and why they're doing what they're doing. Because, sure, 2 + 2 = 4, but like, why do you need to know that? Because maybe there's a better way to get there.
Yeah, they're not really coming to you with the problem. They're coming to you with the pain.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out what the problem is.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so when I was done with banking, I went into a little bit of consulting, but it kind of really moved almost like switched gears into healthcare. And we, in healthcare, they have your EMR, which kind of is the ERP for doctors, and did a lot of stuff within the EMR space. The company I was working for at the time, we actually were migrating data between different EMRs. So my superpower was data migration. And the company I was working for was in Texas, and they were essentially acquiring mom and pop medical clinics, small ones, and then turning them into a large conglomerate to where they were all running the same EMR. They had a shared IT department, all that stuff. So as we'd acquire a doctor's clinic, we would have to figure out how to get all their data out of their EMR and into ours. And so data migration was a big one there. And again, you start learning what they're doing, why they're doing it. Oh, this makes sense. You got to have this stuff over here, and try to do that translation. And so in the middle of all of this, I was still doing some consulting on the side, and interesting enough to kind of where this ties back into the VelocIT thing, I was doing work for a Formula One race team in France. And we were doing kind of hard to explain, but they called it a virtual dynamometer, where we essentially would put audio sensors and different sensors within the engine and take it back into the computer to process, and they could basically tell by noise what that engine was doing. And we were building plugins for this system to be able to handle specific engines. So if we were dealing with, Racer 1 versus Racer 2, we would know what was specific for that engine and be able to handle the feeds differently. That plugin technology that we developed for that actually became the underlying basis of what we did for VelocIT, because we basically ended up building it as a black box that the gateways were on one side and we wrote to the black box. So when we built our first stuff for Sage 100 at the time, the Providix developer I was working with and I came up with this kind of common language we would talk in, and then my black box would convert it through the plugins to talk to Auth.net or USA ePay or whoever, so that we could bring in multiple gateways. And the point of that product was that what we needed in Sage at the time was the ability to bring in payments from I think, who was it, Jeremy? My brain is just gone blank. Website Pipeline. So Website Pipeline was doing transactions kind of e-commerce style for one of our customers, and they wanted to be able to have auth.net be the processor that they were using inside of Sage as well, so that everything was holistic. So if the order came in from Website Pipeline and they needed to do a refund, they could just do the refund in Sage. And it wasn't convoluted at all. But we had other people that were using USA ePay or PayTrace or eventually CardPoint, ProCharge. We had, I think, 7 or 8 that we were doing. And the general idea was the same, is like, why are we storing these cards multiple times? Why are we processing in one system over here and one system over there? Let's just do omni-channel, one view. And Sage's take at the time was, well, everything needs to run through us. I'm like, well, that's great, but what about these secondary channels? Well, they should run that through us too. Well, nobody's going to rewrite all of their stuff to be, Sage's gateway. All this other stuff already exists, so we got to be able to make them work. And it's like, well, you just record them as a cash transaction. And they weren't listening to what the customer needed. They were just telling them, well, this is how you have to do it right now. And that's what we were trying to solve for, was trying to make sure that, as they were doing their processes, that it could come in and holistically be handled through the entire accounting process, from order entry to shipping to, final delivery and capture of that money. And so we had gone down this path of write once, use many, and that was that plug-in process that I learned working for that team in France. Was, well, I think I could recycle this code from the race car program, and Jeremy's like, what?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very hard to be good, everywhere and be everything to everybody. And I think that was sort of the plug-in mantra, is sort of where our paths crossed initially. I kept telling Shawn, over here, back when Sage Payment Solutions existed as its own thing before predates Paya, this is how you process how Sage processes. Here's how you're going to process with our software. And I think what's happened between now and then and over the years is commerce has exploded, and the new concepts are, the people want the frictionless experience they want, whether it's in Shopify or Magento or 3D Cart or Volusion or wherever, or if it's at the counter. I mean, we all know what self-checkout is now. So everybody knows how to use a credit card machine. And they expect that stuff. It's sort of like, when I was in the power company, public power business, everybody just expects the lights to turn on. But there's a lot that happens between the power production, the hydro system, and when the light switch comes on. And that's sort of where we're at, is we're in this new age where everybody just expects you should be able to take a card. And historically, everybody was a terms account. And the core financials basically bundle everything up, and then you could pay with a credit card at the end of the month. Well, everybody wants the cash process sped up. It needs to be real time now. We need our, just-in-time manufacturing. They need cash, and they need to pay their bills. And so what's happened is a lot of us are stuck, and a lot of folks in the pain point, and this is where Acumatica comes in with this open platform, is people are coming to Acumatica because of the flexibility, and that's driving payments providers like Paya to be able to meet those expectations and give them everything. And that's where this plug-in model became sort of magical. And the aha moment was, well, VelocIT's already doing this and it's proven. And, let's bring this team in here. And to their credit, they've given us a lot of latitude and a lot of ability to expand these teams to meet the expectations that come with Paya. So, that it means we have, I think, approaching 20 people in our product department that weren't there a year ago. Either through acquisition of our team, along with the growth, along with the reorganization, people that, resources that are attributed to making this new paradigm work. We're probably maybe even a touch higher than 20 in this first year. So, the Paya went all in with the fact that we need to modernize, and we're going to support you in that effort. And it just happens to be that Shawn and I had a pretty clear vision around Acumatica that we're also applying to other, part of our, people use the term payments orchestration. That's one way to look at it. I call it connected commerce is sort of the way I'm bundling up everything. But the idea that we're just a processor is like 2015. We're building everything on our strength of being an acquirer and these platforms that we own, but we're software development companies now. And then with that, you need to have that 20 years of experience that Shawn and 30 years of experience that Rebecca bring of the magic of knowing. I'll tell you one Acumatica story that early on Shawn did. When he designed our products, he designed it in a way that you could turn stuff on or off because he realized it was resource intensive to just deliver all of our solutions. He says, why do we want to draw these screens and do all this stuff that if people are not going to have counter sales and card present, we're not going to turn that on and make the system resources generate all of our stuff. I mean, that's the level of thinking that comes in with engineering when you deal with, he understands the resources that are involved in a cloud-based environment and that stuff is finite and precious. So again, when you're delivering our product, you should expect that level of attention to detail. And it's not just the service that we started out talking about. It's that engineering mindset and knowing the impacts of your development, having that network engineering background and understanding that if we want to scale this and give everybody the best experience possible, this is what we have to do with our infrastructure. And sometimes we have to get involved as Acumatica has grown and every new, not every new, but it's exponential, the amount of resources that takes as you move into newer versions that we've also had to collaborate and coach on. It may not have an impact, like your data hasn't changed, but the new program and the processes that it goes through to run payments, that hardware and that instance that you're hosting on, Mr. Partner or Mrs. Partner, needs to change. It's not slow because of us. It's slow because of you. Somebody has to deliver that message and fight those battles. And, that's been also a nuance of having a partner like us involved that is useful, right? Because we don't just say it's your fault. We're demonstrating collaboratively. It's the old cold transfer, right? Everybody understands it when they're on the other end of it and they key all their information in and then they get transferred and somebody says, who is this? And you're like, you have to repeat it. Oh, not my department, somebody. That's what we're doing behind the scenes from the development standpoint is we're giving a warm transfer. We've done all this work, help us get it to here. And I think the channel and the folks we interact with appreciate that. And that's the word that I'm trying to get out from a marketing standpoint is this is what's special and what's different about Paya in 2021 moving forward. And we want people to hear about. So
yeah, I've heard two things. Like one is the core product, that goes to QA and testing and all that. And the other is the magic of making it work in the real world and the nuances of the specific customer that you're working with. I wonder if you could tell me one or two kind of interesting customizations that you might have done, enabling payments on manufacturing work order, or I don't know, some kind of interesting situation that you were able to accommodate. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if you can think of maybe just one off the top of your head.
I'll let Shawn share. He seems to come up with all the great opportunities and solutions.
I don't know. I think the one we did recently, I should say recently, it was actually probably 2 years ago, but time flies. We had a client that wanted to have their customers have the ability to maintain their saved cards for them through the Acumatica portal. And so we built in screens. So, I think most everybody has done some kind of modification to allow you to do payments in the portal. What we added on was the ability for you to actually maintain your saved cards. So you got a new expiration date, you can sign into the portal and find your saved card and update it. You got a new card you want to make sure that we have, you can go add it in there. And then we were actually in the process of getting ready to upgrade that to do some new things when Acumatica announced that they were going to, embed payments in the portal on their own. which means I'm very much I like coming up with the new toys, but if I'm being really honest, it's a giant pain in the butt to maintain them. It's been, version after version after version. So whenever Acumatica is good enough to move it into a core offering so I don't have to maintain it, I'm very much all for that. It does tend to, quote unquote, level the playing field a little bit, but, it just gives me that much more resources to then go look at new features and new functionality and stuff. And so, pretty much everything we do just comes off of what customers want. I think the other one I would say is actually defaulting processing centers by branch is something we added in per a customer request that I thought made a lot of sense. Interestingly enough, if you know payments very well inside of Acumatica, you'll know that I want to say it was 20R1. It might have been 19R2. They got rid of the processing center field in the payment screen. So you can see all of the saved cards, but you don't know who they belong to. So if you were in fact are running multiple merchant accounts because you have multiple locations and there's one per location, there's no way to know who you saved the card for. And so we have one customer, they've got like 18 locations, and every location has its own merchant account because they have card present terminals in those locations and they have their own checking accounts for those locations. I mean, corporately, they all roll up accounting-wise, but it is essentially a separate business. And so it all has to be routed properly. We had to go back in and backfill in all the ability to see the processing centers, but more importantly, filter the saved cards that you can see on a given document to that processing center. So I can't go say I need a saved card for, John Doe, but the one I grabbed is for 2 cities over. That doesn't do me any good because they're saved to the merchant account. That's the way that it works. And so Acumatica thought they were being helpful in making it simpler to just go choose the saved card you want, not realizing that it completely messed up accounting. And so
I'm curious, when you would do those, I mean, I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would do like a separate customization project. This is a customer specific thing. So you don't have to, you can do it faster than having to push it through your core product. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, and it depends on how we handle it. It depends on the nature of the customization. When we get these ones that was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Everybody will want this. We roll it into the core, but we just roll it into the core as a feature so that you can use it or not use it. But
you're not afraid to go off and do a separate one.
Yeah.
In that you've got something special for that customer, and you're not afraid to leave the core and accommodate a special situation.
Yep, exactly. And we have, we also, since the Paya acquisition, we've also broken out a lot of our functionality into specific areas. So before we just had one kind of holistic project and then a handful of one-offs that were customer specific. We've now broken it down to where we have our core processing, and then we do things like Click to Pay as its own module. Things that are not necessarily something every single merchant are going to have. We've broken those into their own modules. So we have a capture for more. You do an authorization on your sales order. When it comes time to ship it, there's been some kind of change, and now they owe more than the original pre-authorization was for. We give you the ability to capture that final amount as a single transaction rather than having to capture for the original amount and then do another charge for the difference. That specific thing is merchant account setup driven. So we don't want you to just turn it on because you see it in the list. We want to know that you're going to use it. And so it's a separate module so we can kind of control and make sure that you have a good experience with it. Bank deposit's another one that is a separate module but ties into credit cards. And I don't know, I'll be honest with you, Tim, I can't remember your background well enough to know if you're familiar with it, but when you take transactions in, a resident for their cash, check, credit card, they go into your undeposited funds. And then ultimately when you are taking them to the bank or you get your deposit into the bank, you'll then run bank deposit to move that money out of that clearing account into a lump sum. We've did some modifications to bank deposit to allow you to select your processing center and have it go out and just load everything for you automatically, so that you don't have to go and find each of those transactions individually. And
yeah, that's part of your reconciliation stuff that you
yep,
guys do.
yeah.
Right?
That was originally a one-off for a customer, and we kind of realized probably everybody's going to want this. And so we'll break these things up into kind of categories, if you will, and have their own modules now within the Paya ecosystem, which then also facilitates us making one-off cut for the customers as well, because they're all designed in a very similar way, and they all use, I don't know if it's okay if I share my screen, I can show you.
I'm actually only recording audio.
Oh,
so
you are? Okay.
No one's going to see it.
Oh, no, okay. All right. Anyhow, we have, much like the Acumatica enable disable features, we have a Paya enable disable features, and all of our customizations, whether it's the core one or any of the children, go inside of that. And as you want to use a certain feature, you can go turn it on. And this is handled by tenant. So within the Acumatica ecosystem, if you have multiple tenants in a single instance, even if you only publish to one of the tenants, really everybody gets it. And so you want to have the ability to disable by tenant, or preferably have them disabled automatically until you enable them by tenant, so that when that publication happens, you're not clobbering something in another tenant.
I want to touch, Shawn, on the new thing that we did. It's new to market, and we just put some PR out around it. But we've also we've enabled and validated third-party ISVs that we have commonalities. Their software would benefit from payments and having all the connections into the back end that we provide. So two of them that we've just recently done some business with is One Retail was the one we announced today. So not only do our terminals seamlessly work in a full point of sale environment, you can use our counter sale capability, but we send more data back and forth. So they're included in our reconciliation, their point of sale system and all those transactions. So as we're depositing them, they're bringing in and posting the data from the transactions that were made on those documents, and everything's linked. We also have enabled the ability to, there's obviously some training and some situational stuff that comes with this, but they can enable stored cards inside of the Acumatica to be seen at the register with our joint modification. So instead of checking out with your normal checkout experience, if I've sent my son or daughter down to pick something up and I have an account, you know who I am. Yes. Oh, hey, yeah, that's right. You're right. Hey, Joey's going to come in and pick up a bag of nuts and bolts for me. Can you go ahead and just put it on the card on file? Sure. But they still run everything through the point of sale, through their standard process, and everything's paid. And so you get the advantage of having a terms type feel, but yet you as a business who's trying to speed up cash flow still gets to apply it directly to a card. It hits your funds every day like normal. But yet it's sort of that terms type of account. Yeah, you can have that type of cash and carry terms with us. You just, it's done at the point of sale, and you just let us know who's authorized. So I don't have to manage spend on all those different cards that all my employees would have in the field, right? And then we've enabled signature capture for Rental 360. We are working in a phase 2 of allowing them to use that device on wherever they want. But Shawn has built, our signature capture devices can be used outside the transaction, like a Topaz. So we extend, again, all these features are giving folks sort of a one-stop shop. So they don't have to go and deal with a separate signature capture function and a Topaz and other devices. It just becomes all-inclusive. And that's why we built our click-to-pay portal. We have some other integrations and things that we're working on that will help with e-commerce and moving data. That'll be launched. You should hear about that later in the year. But it's trying to simplify the channel. It's trying to simplify, create AR automation. And anytime we see an opportunity to make it a one-stop shop and provide that white glove service and control everything with a one-call resolution, that's what you're going to see and feel from a partnership with Paya. As far as the reseller that's dealing with payments, they're like, okay, and we will tell them up front, hey, you're dealing with something in the UK, and this is a multinational client. We're not strong in UK. This processing center is going to work in North America, and we can do some stuff in Canada, and we can do some stuff in the US. We'll just tell them up front that you're going to have to find a solution over here for this. And I would guess that in certain situations, we will be able to enable what we have with a gateway over there, and they will bring a payment processor for the UK at some point that we'll have a relationship with. That's probably not too far off in the future. Again, not my decision in a publicly traded company anymore. But we are that, Acumatica and payments processing is universal. How the workflows are there. Our product is just, plug in the particular gateway, and a lot of these features, if your gateway supports it, we can provide it. It doesn't matter what continent it's on, structurally. So I think the one retail piece that we did with Jerry was great because it started with us enabling terminals for a group of clients. And then he came back and said, the customer's asking for this. Somewhere during the sales process, they thought that they could get access to stored cards in Acumatica on one retail. And so Shawn was like, actually, we could probably do that. And Shawn and Jerry's developer, Shawn, sat down and figured out a solution and actually provided that. And it became actually a pretty cool feature that we just recently released. So we're trying to, by bringing together the ISVs in the channel, we're trying to make it easier for the resellers to navigate Acumatica commerce, right? This whole connected commerce piece is something that we're really trying to, trying not just to deliver, but just, I think, execute is right. Probably the better word for this, because anybody can deliver a concept, but you've got to be able to support it to really fully execute on it. You've got to be able to have people that understand the vision and they step away from their job as developer and say, as a consumer, this would be cool. I've used this at Walmart. I've used this in, why can't we do this? And that's the question. That's where VelocIT was born, was asking those questions, is like in Sage 100 back in the day, why are people not allowing you to take a credit card here? These people are using this as a point of sale system, right? Why don't we have a credit card machine here? And that's sort of what spiraled the growth of our business, was doing stuff that the other folks weren't doing, that, certain segments of the business were asking for, and, a business model was born. So, but that was probably the latest one that Shawn's released, was the one retail. And, the rental 360 is in flight. You will see at our Acumatica Summit booth, we are setting up sort of a dynamic demo situation. We're going to have our card present. We're going to have a one retail example. We probably won't be demoing the rental 360 because I think that's, a little more complex process to get into, the rental process. But they are a partner we enable, and we are going to co-brand and collaborate with. You'll see their brand in our booth. And I expect that there'll be others along the way that we'll be doing some business with, and, enabling features cohesively and basically selling inside of each other's channels. So again, trying to simplify everything payments wise. So we are, we do have an AP product that Paya Payables that we are going to be rolling out in Q1 in Acumatica. And it's essentially our base product will be essentially synchronizing into a dashboard. So we're not trying to be Avid Exchange, right? Avid Exchange does what Avid Exchange does. We're trying to simplify pay. We have a lot of people that say, hey, can I go ahead and pay this out? Yeah, if you need all of the things that Avid Exchange does, you go there. If you don't, then you use Paya Payables. And our long-term plans with that are to, again, take the product from what it is today and have an API connection that allows our ERP clients to stay and do what they want to do in the ERP. I think out of the box, day one, when we inherited the project and went to launch, we said, it's good and it does what it does. We would like it to do more, but you had to start with what was built and that we inherited and say, let's go to market with this. And that's where we're at. And we're aware of what it is, right? We don't try to oversell it. Here's exactly what it is. And we can accomplish pushing out the payables And the future state is that we want to give you full controls of that inside of the ERP, so the AP clerk can stay inside the ERP, and just the customers using the portal, right, when they're onboarding or bringing in documents. So that's sort of the not to try to wrap it up, but to try to give you sort of like where we land, I think, and where we're all headed to Summit, excited about, is we're going to have 16 people there from the Paya team. We have a whole host of folks. We have our developers, we have our sales team, we have some ELT folks. Ben, our chief strategy officer, but he's the executive vice president of our B2B and our government divisions. He'll be there, and we're throwing a big party in conjunction with Avalara and Avid Exchange at TAL on Sunday night. So just after the opening ceremonies, we will be throwing a party until 11:30 over at TAL at the nightclub. And it's an exclusive invite-only VIP type event that we are, having our key partners and stakeholders, Avid Exchange again, Avalara, Venn Technologies, ourselves, and I know that there is another sponsor on there that I am probably doing a disservice to by not mentioning their name, but I'm going to apologize to whoever that was. I know that there's 5 of us.
I wanted to ask you so we got the annual summit. That's huge, right? What are the things that are on for the both of you, in terms of community involvement? And it sounds like everyone's super busy right now with how popular Acumatica is. So maybe it's not as pressing right now, but, what are ways that we can reach out? This is like a group brainstorm activity here right now. What are ways that we could reach out to the Acumatica community at large? And I don't know if it's on low code, no code. We've talked a lot about development, or maybe it's on payment specifically. What are some ideas for, I don't know, something more than just the once a year at Summit that we could kind of compare notes, is how I look at it, and have, I don't know if you even called it an event, but some more regular gatherings and meeting of the minds around how to use Acumatica better.
I'm a firm believer in the user groups. Those tend to be a little bit more regional, but at least you're getting like-minded people together that can talk through, and I'm having this problem, anybody else having this problem, and really thinking that kind of stuff through. Acumatica has been really getting, I think, more vested in having and supporting those user groups as well. And so I think personally, whether we're talking Paya specifically or we're talking just generically, I think a lot of the ISVs should be engaging with those user groups. And I'm like, you can look at it selfishly. These user group meetings and the problems these guys are trying to solve become really excellent material for you to figure out what your next offering is going to be. So you're getting some product ideas as well as being able to, support that community and help them, in general, bringing that knowledge base out to help. And so I think, those user groups become mini summits. And that's where I would put my efforts.
We're on the same page there.
I agree.
Yeah.
As I say, I think the regional part of it is important, because you can get some of those smaller, more intimate discussions that are focused. And it's just from our perspective, we really rely on folks like you, Tim. Like, we're operating the day-to-day, and we try to do the marketing to the best of our ability, and we partner with some folks to get the message out there. But the grassroots effort of really getting into the trusted networks that the consultants are supporting is, to me, where we need to land. I think it's the $1 million question of how do we get there? And in this post-COVID world, how do we get folks together? Is virtual good enough? And do you have an event quarterly in each region or monthly, or how do you execute? I don't think anybody's had the answer,
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I like the regional myself as well, because kind of burned out on virtual gatherings myself, and there's a lot of pent up appetite for in person, I think, at least on my side personally. And it's just you lose the breadth of expertise when you go to a specific location, but you get the benefit of being in person, right? So I think, I don't know, to me, that's where it's trending, is more and more of these local, in different cities type of gatherings.
I would say the only negative, and this is, this is minor, but there's still a lot of people out there that are timid about the group gatherings, and it's harder, I feel like, for some of these user groups to accommodate the virtual presence, if you will, for those ones that don't want to travel but still want to participate. It's getting easier and easier all the time. Obviously, the technology is improving substantially for these virtual events, but I think that you'll get a lot more participation if those user groups are able to do kind of a hybrid event where they can come in, and whether they're watching quote unquote the webinar and the speakers talking, or it's a round table where everybody's involved, and you got quote unquote a speakerphone there with the virtual people on it as well, but just some way to involve those ones that aren't willing to travel, because in some cases they're the ones with the questions that need to be asked, if you will.
Well, let's keep trying stuff. I know the three of us, we have a interesting community, so we just keep tinkering and keep trying things and see what works. At least see what works this year. Right.
I would love to check in with you on a quarterly basis and be able to tell you the updates and what's happening. Have, Nick on at some point and visit with him about his journey as a consultant, and, the other folks that we have in our channel. Even though Rebecca's more coordinating, she calls it herding her unicorns, but the unicorn wrangler. Just a fascinating path she's had in ERP and servicing a lot of these channels that people came to Acumatica from somewhere. So all these paths, they have a lot of commonalities. So we'd love to share the rest of the team with you at some point, and let you guys talk shop and kind of get their ideas and their names out there. I think that once people discover the folks that we have out here, it certainly makes my job easier in validating, that we're not a newcomer to Acumatica. We've been here for a long time. So.
No, that sounds like a great idea. Love to hear about the AP product as well. Yeah, I think we got a few episodes already queued up, and let's take that into 2023.
Awesome. Thank you for the time. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great holiday season here as it's rapidly upon us.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and see you both at Summit.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.